then, just like that, father goes missing. His wife is consumed by an overwhelming panic, searching for him with frantic desperation. I gotta get to him. We gotta find him, she insists, her voice trembling with fear and determination. In her quest, she becomes a vital go-between, relaying cryptic clues that she believes are messages from the man who's vanished. It's Pickle. The urgency of her words hangs heavy in the air. Will this clue finally help the police unravel the mystery of his disappearance? I could see the sincerity etched on her face. She truly believed every syllable she uttered. He wants to be found, and that flicker of hope ignited a firestorm of emotions within her. On the fateful night of March 1st, 1997, in the quiet town of Sharpsville, Pennsylvania, local chef Daryl Kart set out after work, unaware of the turmoil that awaited him. He had yet to return home to his wife, Jeanette, and their 2 small children. A gnawing dread enveloped her as she pieced together the fragments of that evening. He told me he was going to see some friends at a bar, which was very unusual for him, she noted, a chill creeping into her voice. Daryl was known as a dedicated family man, rarely straying from their cozy home. Something was undeniably wrong, echoing ominously in her heart. On Sunday, the dread deepened as Daryl still had not returned home, pushing Jeanette Kozart to report him missing to the police. To the officers, however, it was merely another missing person case, as common as the changing seasons. They had seen spouses like her before, anxious and convinced that their loved ones had simply run off with friends for a brief escape. I knew something had to have happened to him for him not to contact me, and not to let us know he was okay, she lamented, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Typically, within 48 hours, the missing person would materialize back at home, perhaps looking sheepish or needing to smooth over some bruised feelings. But this time, the silence felt like a storm brewing on the horizon, ominous and unyielding. They took a dismissive tone, practically shrugging off my concerns with, "Don't worry, he's probably just on a drinking binge." My frustration boiled over. "No, this is not my husband," I retorted, my voice thick with emotion. "He didn't do those kinds of things. He went to work. He came home. This is not who he is." The gap between their perception and my reality felt like an insurmountable chasm. The police, oblivious to any troubles at home that might have driven him away, informed me that it would take a full 72 hours before they could officially list him as a missing person. That cruel delay pushed us into a frenzy of action. We took matters into our own hands, fueled by frustration. We began making flyers in a desperate bid for answers. I just thought, "Well, maybe he's hurt," I cried, determination lighting a fire within me. "I've got to get to him. We've got to find him." Scott's mother arrived at the newsstand owned by the enigmatic psychic Mary Ellen Rodriguez, bringing with her a handful of missing person flyers. Her son-in-law, Daryl Kart, had been absent for 2 agonizing days. As she handed me the missing persons paper, an inexplicable energy surged through me at the moment of contact. It was as if Daryl's essence rippled through the air, awakening something profound suddenly. There was Daryl, standing mere inches from me, his presence shimmering with urgency. Here was Mary on one side, grounding in this world, while Daryl flickered on the other, a ghostly figure with his hands pressed against an unseen barrier. Desperation filled his voice as he pleaded, "Just show me where the door is. Just show me where the doorway is so I can come back. I need to come back." The collision of these 2 realms left me breathless, each moment layered with tension and an almost unbearable longing. I gasped, "Mary, he's dead. He's dead. He's standing right next to you." She turned and looked, confusion flickering across her features. Jill remained oblivious to his presence, while I could see him so vividly that it felt as though I could reach out and touch him. The profound connection between our worlds hung thick in the air, and I sensed Mary recognizing that I could touch her too, the weight of the moment pulsing with palpable intensity. Later, I relayed my bizarre encounter to my daughter, struggling to make sense of it all. Compelled by a mixture of hope and desperation, Jeanette ventured to the newsstand, praying that this total stranger, Mary Ellen, would possess the insight to help her find Daryl. The moment I walked in, Mary Ellen approached me, enveloping me in her arms with a fierce tenderness. I'm so sorry, Jeanette. I'm so sorry, I am so sorry, I am so sorry." Her words dripped with empathy, each repetition igniting a well of sorrow within me, heightening the gnawing uncertainty that hung like a shadow over my heart. Mary Ellen assured me that what I felt wasn't just her own grief. It was Daryl reaching out, whispering an apology through her "He's just so sorry," she explained, her voice thick with emotion. I felt compelled to convey his message. "He's standing there next to you. He's so sorry. He's trying to find his way back. But he can't come back." The weight of my words hung in the air, a heavy realization that made my heart ache. As the atmosphere grew thick with tension, she disclosed that Daryl had been shot and warned that we would find him, with a rope around his neck. Mary Ellen spoke of her role as a conduit between two worlds, with Daryl urging her to relay his messages to Jeanette. Daryl kept saying to me, "Ghost, tell her Ghost." I relayed, feeling the urgency pulsing between us. "Does Ghost mean anything to you?" I asked. Searching her eyes for understanding, she reared back, incredulity flashing on her face as she raised her hand. Yes, that was our favorite movie. The connection deepened, intertwining their shared memories with the haunting reality we face. The moment she spoke those words, chills cascaded from my head down to my toes, electrifying every nerve. In that instant, an undeniable realization crashed over me. This was him, the real thing. No matter how desperately I wished for him to be present on Earth with us, he was irrevocably gone. Later that same day, Mary Ellen welcomed another visitor, Detective Jerry Smith. "Hi, Jerry, how are you tonight?" she greeted, her voice a blend of warmth and trepidation. He was a policeman from the next town over, where Daryl Kart had once lived, and the air felt thick with unspoken tension. As Jerry stepped inside, I found myself compelled to say, "You know, that guy that's missing. He's dead." His initial reaction was one of disbelief, a look that practically screamed, "You know, you're nuts." Unfazed, Mary Ellen pressed on. "No, I have this vision, and I see things, and he's laying out in a field or a swamp." The urgency in her voice quickened. "My heart, it's real, Marshy," she continued, her brow furrowing in concentration. "And I can see he has something around his neck, like a rope or a chain, and he's been shot." The weight of her revelations weighed heavily upon me, leaving me at a loss, grappling with the foreboding truth she unveiled. He looked at me, skepticism dancing in his eyes, and asked, "How do I know he's dead?" I replied, "Well, he's standing right next to you." At first, I thought Mary Ellen was joking, but as I scanned her face, the sincerity became unmistakable. She was deeply invested in what she was saying, a bizarre conviction that sent chills down my spine. Yet the situation was complicated. You can't use apparitions or visions as testimony in any court of law, the very foundation of our legal system. To vow or affirm the truth based solely on a vision wouldn't hold weight. Essentially, it meant our insights constituted little more than pieces of information meant to guide the investigator, more of a tool than viable evidence. However, Jerry felt compelled to pass along this information. Rooted in Mary Ellen's credibility, she wasn't just some transient wandering in off the street claiming, "Hey, I had a vision." No, she was a respected businesswoman with a solid reputation in the community, someone who had established herself in that neighborhood for years. Detective Smith convened with the Sharpsville police, the authority with jurisdiction over the case. I distinctly remember saying, "I don't think I'm crazy. I'm not drinking. I'm not smoking anything, but Mary claims she had a vision, and the person you're looking for is deceased. He was murdered." The officer's expression was hard to miss. An unmistakable look that said, "Yes, you're right. I do think you're crazy still." He dutifully took the information down, a flicker of curiosity perhaps lingering beneath his skepticism. Skeptical yet intrigued, the Sharpsville police began to investigate Detective Smith's information. An officer made a visit to Mary Ellen, where she insisted that Daryl was guiding her words, relaying what he needed them to know. "Well, yes," I chimed in. "I said he's dead," and that seemed to be the haunting refrain echoing in my mind, repeated over and over. Daryl's spirit desired them to know where he had been shot, and I conveyed everything I felt. His pain resonated within me, as if I could truly understand and feel the impact of the bullet, wrapping me in a tide of sorrow and urgency amidst Mary Ellen's cryptic clues. The police remained unconvinced, viewing the situation as nothing more than a husband who had simply run off. They painted a picture of Daryl as a devoted father, one who played football with his son and taught his daughter how to ride her bike. Yet it felt as though nobody was truly motivated to pursue a thorough investigation into the whereabouts of this young man. Frustration welled within me, an urgent ache burning deep. I craved answers so desperately that it felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. Deep within her, Mary Ellen sensed Daryl's desperate plea for help. "Please tell them that I'm dead. Please tell them they need to be looking for me," she urged, an intensity coloring her voice that made my heart race with urgency. It was a haunting testimony, a call from beyond that resonated with both dread and determination. A father of two vanishes one night in a small Pennsylvania town, leaving an unsettling void that echoes through his family. Daryl Cozart's loved ones instinctively sense that something is terribly wrong and begin their frantic search for him. From the moment psychic Mary Ellen Rodriguez learns of the case, she feels Daryl is a constant companion, an ethereal presence at her side. Every morning, as I crossed the bridge into Pennsylvania, Daryl would tip my rearview mirror down, his eyes staring back at me with an almost haunting familiarity. "Good morning, Daryl," I would say, and thus began our day together. Mary Ellen was convinced he was trying to convey what had happened to him, but the clues came in a disjointed chorus. "He's screaming it in my ear. It's fickle. It's fickle," she lamented, pacing restlessly, her brow furrowed in frustration. "What do you mean fickle? What's so fickle? Who's being fickle?" Her questions hung in the air, thick with urgency, waiting for an answer that seemed just out of reach. Daryl had now been missing for more than 72 hours, a ticking clock weighing heavily on everyone's heart. The police finally decided to delve deeper into his disappearance, questioning those who worked with him in hopes of uncovering a lead. However, all they found were echoes of admiration. There were no signs of foul play, as everyone they spoke to spoke fondly of Daryl. He was genuinely likable, and it seemed he had no enemies. Yet, amid the sea of friendly recollections, they stumbled upon one individual who might hold a key to that fateful night. Among the co-workers interviewed, one woman stood out as one of the last people to see Daryl alive. Despite her prominence in the investigation, there was no immediate reason for the police to suspect her, leaving an unsettling doubt lingering like a shadow. Jeanette Cozart knew Daryl's co-worker only by her first name. Cindy? Or perhaps Cynthia. Stepping into the restaurant where he had worked, she found Cindy there, who immediately asked what brought her in. "I'm looking for Daryl," Jeanette replied, desperation lacing her voice. "Have you seen Daryl?" Cindy hesitated, her brow furrowing. "Well, no. I saw him last night. He worked here last night, and he took me home. But that's the last time I saw him." A wave of uncertainty washed over me as I absorbed her words. "Okay," I said. And then Cindy hugged me tightly, assuring me that everything was going to be all right. "He'll turn up," she said, a false promise that felt heavy in my heart. But that was not what Mary Ellen was telling Jeanette. She firmly believed that Daryl had been shot, and a grim realization gnawed at her. He had also been hung. It was as if she were reliving his final moments, a visceral connection to his pain. I felt like I was choking, and I wanted to pull this away from my throat, she revealed, her eyes wide with horror. It dawned on her that there was indeed a rope around her neck, a suffocating reminder of his fate. At one point, her forehead began to itch as she scratched at it. She felt an insistent sensation, as if she were adjusting a bandana on her head. The chilling realization struck her at the moment of his murder. Daryl had been wearing a bandana. Mary Ellen felt Daryl's urgent need to get her attention in more tangible ways. He would start banging on my walls. My walls would resonate with the pounding, and my phone would ring incessantly, as if he were trying to communicate with me. It was a frantic call to action. "Come on, you've got to do something. You have to call them. Tell them," she insisted, and I understood. So I did, driven by Daryl's desperate desire to be found and her relentless urge to assist Jeanette. Mary Ellen embarked on her own nightly quest for clues. "I totally went looking for the body because nobody believed me," she stated solemnly. Jeanette's life was spiraling in chaos, with the news media descending upon her and the struggle to keep her children calm. I became a search party of one in my spare time, venturing out alone under the cover of darkness, hoping Daryl would guide me to where his body lay hidden. Each time I drew near, I could feel his excitement bubble within me, a signal that I was close. It was exhilarating and haunting, like, this is it, and he would urge me, here. Mary Ellen sensed that Daryl persistently guided her back to one specific street, an area heavy with significance, the very place where his body lay, where it all had transpired. He acknowledged that it was right around in here, she insisted, urgency lacing her tone. This is where they killed me. This is where they murdered me. Frustration laced his presence, palpable and raw. At the indifference displayed by the police department in their quest to find him, I felt powerless in my inability to assist him, save for my own determination to search for him tirelessly. Determined and perhaps urged on by Daryl's restless spirit, Mary Ellen pressed on. After days of relentless searching, she finally felt a spark of connection, a signal she believed came directly from him. I was out looking for a sign of where Daryl may be when I spoke to him directly. I said, "Please help me to help you. Show me where you may be, or even in the area. Show me." And then I found the sneaker, she recounted, her heart racing. It was pointed west towards the airport. That may have been a sign that he's either in this area or down that way, west towards the airport. An anxious knot formed in her stomach. She worried that no one would believe her, so she chose not to mention the shoe to the police, even though she felt it might truly have been a sign after all. A week after Daryl's disappearance, police discovered his van near the airport. Inside, they unearthed chilling evidence of his murder, a sickening sight that confirmed Mary Ellen's fear. The van bore traces of blood. He hadn't simply entered those doors. There was blood on the carpet. There are only a few ways blood could have ended up in such a place, and tragically, one of those ways meant Daryl was deceased. From the very beginning, Mary Ellen had insisted to the police that Daryl was dead. Now, with this grim confirmation, it felt like a validation for both her and for Daryl, a sigh of relief that seemed to echo in the darkness. See, now they know I'm dead. With the investigation now officially classified as a murder case, the police found themselves under mounting pressure to locate Daryl's body. The uncertainty loomed like a heavy cloud. They didn't know where he had been killed or who had done it. The last thing they wanted was for the public to feel unsafe, knowing that a killer was potentially lurking somewhere nearby, ready to strike again. To find the murderer, the police understood that they needed more evidence, a critical piece of the puzzle that had to be uncovered before time slipped away. Mary Ellen felt a palpable connection, sensing that Daryl was guiding her in her search for his body. In a moment of peculiar clarity, she recalled, "They showed me a picture. There was a calendar on my wall, and it depicted a bog area with high grass and a little fence. That's where his body was." As the days wore on, Mary Ellen knew that Daryl was desperate to be found, a growing agitation emanating from him that felt almost suffocating. What happened next left her shaken. "I'm driving to church when suddenly he grabs my steering wheel," he said. "I want to go to the police department. I want them to know. I want to be buried in a gray pinstriped suit." In that moment, his urgency was undeniable. "Finally, I struck a deal with him." "Okay, Daryl," I negotiated. "You let me go to church, and afterwards, I will drive to the police department and we'll talk." To my relief, he conceded and let go of the steering wheel, his presence momentarily calming as I felt the weight of our pact between the living and the dead. After leaving church, Mary Ellen made her way to the Sharksville Police Department, her heart pounding with urgency as she confronted them about their lack of action. "Why aren't you checking the nearby bogs, like the one in the picture on my calendar?" she pressed, frustration bubbling to the surface. "You've got a picture of where he's located. Can you find that area? Can't you just search? My forehead is still itchy, so he's still wearing the bandana." The officer, however, wasn't convinced that her revelations held any merit. He dismissed her insistence with a wave of his hand, saying, "I don't have the manpower to do that, and that could be any place." But Daryl was there, his voice echoing through Mary Ellen's mind, answering her unspoken questions with a sense of urgency. Sensing the impasse, the officer shifted slightly, and, with a hint of reluctant seriousness, leaned closer to her. "Will you tell him that if he wants to wear that suit, we better find him soon? Mary Ellen relayed messages back and forth, channeling Daryl's devoted spirit as she connected with the Sharksville police. Finally, she delivered one last critical piece of information from him. Tell them before Tuesday. Before Tuesday morning, they will find me. Daryl Kart had been missing for over a week, but psychic Mary Ellen Rodriguez felt an unwavering conviction that the police were on the cusp of discovering his body. Monday afternoon, as if the universe aligned with her predictions, everything came to a head. I could feel his excitement coursing through me. My hands trembled, and I was shaken. Daryl's anticipation pulsed in the air around me, and I knew he was thrilled that they had finally found him. Then came another breakthrough for the police. A passing truck driver on Highway 11, just shy of the Pennsylvania-Ohio border, spotted a body wrapped in plastic, unceremoniously dumped by the roadside. Daryl was found by a bog, precisely as Mary Ellen had predicted. As fate would have it, the truck driver was traversing a road near a swamp when he noticed what he thought was a lifeless body lying amid the tall grasses. He immediately dialed the police, and when they arrived, they discovered that it was indeed Daryl. The revelation struck hard, a wave of horror washing over Mary Ellen as she grappled with the reality of losing Daryl in such a brutal manner. One of the most horrific things I've had to go through in my life. Losing Daryl this way, having him murdered, was hard, she reflected, her voice trembling. Telling our children was the hardest thing I have ever done. At 4 o'clock that fateful day, when they found his body, an exhilarating rush surged through me, but it was swiftly followed by dread as my phone rang. I know, I answered, almost breathless. You found him, didn't you? Deep down, I already sensed the truth. He was wearing the bandana, just as I had envisioned. The news hit like a punch to the stomach. He was found shot, with a rope cruelly wrapped around his neck, almost exactly as I had foreseen. Now do you believe me? Daryl echoed in my thoughts. A haunting refrain it was, as if he was urging the world to accept the reality. There were peculiar details she had described that raised eyebrows, lending credence to her psychic claims. Those details were unsettling. They hinted at knowledge that only someone close to the crime scene could have. Things that hadn't been released to the press, but were eerily present at the crime scene, making one wonder just how much she truly knew. Call it coincidence, call it phenomena, it remains unexplained. Yet, the evidence stands firm, confirming every chilling claim Mary Ellen had shared with the police. The rope hadn't been the instrument of Daryl's death. He had been shot 5 times at close range with a .44 caliber gun. He suffered a brutally violent end, and I saw the whole thing. He showed it to me, relaying every harrowing moment as if I were a witness. The haunting truth was that he hadn't known he was going to be murdered. He had been blissfully unaware he was being set up for death. The shocking discovery of Daryl's body sent ripples through the investigation, leading the police to a tip-off from an unsuspecting man who had crucial information about someone connected to Daryl. Initially, he hadn't seemed suspicious, recounting how he had asked several people to move some furniture. When they went into the garage, he noticed a van containing a large tarp rolled up like a carpet. Intrigued, he mentioned to the police that when he asked them to move it, he felt what resembled legs beneath the tarp. At that moment, dread washed over him as he inquired, "Is this an individual?" To his horror, the answer was yes, and he realized that this friend knew the person was dead. Yet, in a twist of fate, he didn't speak to the police about it until after the heart-wrenching discovery of Daryl's body. Out of a misguided sense of friendship, he simply let it go. But once the grim identity of the deceased became public knowledge, he finally resolved to share what he knew. Amidst the chaos, Mary Ellen held on to one unsolved clue, and suddenly, it was all about to come into focus. "It's Pickle, it's Pickle, it's Pickle." She kept insisting. As it turned out, the name of the suspected killer was Frank Pickle. The tip had come from a friend of his, someone who, just days earlier, had helped Pickle move a body. The revelation struck me like a thunderbolt. This was precisely what Mary Ellen had predicted. She had spoken of someone being fickle, repeating the word over and over again, and I was left bewildered. What's fickle, I wondered, never once associating it with a person's last name. With a warrant in hand, the police meticulously combed through the Pickle home, searching for any shred of evidence. "This is it, here, here, here," one officer exclaimed, excitement coursing through him as they ventured deeper into the abode. It was the very same street Mary Ellen Rodriguez had been driving past, desperately seeking clues in the unsettling case. As they delved into the dimly lit basement, it became chillingly clear that this was where Daryl had met his violent end. The killer had made a desperate attempt to destroy any incriminating evidence. A few walls were freshly painted, the subtle scent of cover-up lingering in the air. The floor bore the signs of being hastily washed down, remnants of bleach still present, betraying the frantic efforts of the murderer. Yet, despite the homeowner's frantic cleaning spree, it was evident that not all evidence had been erased. The truth remained stubbornly etched within those walls. As I searched the basement, I noticed various fibers stubbornly clinging to the cobwebs, remnants of the chaos that had unfolded. My heart raced as I continued to examine the area, and I spotted minute traces of blood spatter dotting the furnace pipes, each speck a grim reminder of Daryl's violent fate. Then, as I scanned the rafters, my breath caught in my throat. There, among the shadows, lay a sizable piece of scalp. In that chilling moment, clarity overcame me when Daryl was murdered. He had been wearing a bandana. Mary Ellen had been eerily right. Daryl had indeed worn a blue bandana when he was shot. We discovered another bandana on the first floor, a startling find marked by a bullet hole precisely where he had been shot, each detail weaving an even darker tapestry of the tragedy that had taken place within those walls. The police turned their attention to Frank Fickle's estranged wife, Cynthia, a pivotal figure in this tragic web. It turned out they had already spoken with her. She had worked alongside Daryl, and was among the last to see him alive. Cynthia recounted that Daryl arrived at the Fickle home around midnight. Eager to be hospitable, she invited him in and directed him to the basement for a smoke, oblivious to the grisly fate that awaited him. She relayed this all to the police with a mix of shock and confusion, insisting she had no idea that Frank Fickle was lurking in the dark, ready to kill Daryl. Frank Fickle was a man consumed by jealousy, haunted by a belief that his estranged wife was having an affair with Daryl. Under the guise of companionship, Daryl had gone down to the cellar for a smoke, completely unaware of the deadly trap that awaited him. It was there, in the confines of the basement, that the shooting took place, an act of malice in which Frank had used Daryl's body as his target practice. On Wednesday, March 12, 1997, Cole was arrested for the murder of Daryl Kart, his rage stemming from a jealousy that boiled over into a shocking act of violence. I can't even begin to articulate the whirlwind of emotions that crash over you when you find yourself face to face with the man who murdered your husband. There's a raw, seething anger boiling beneath the surface, mingling with a crushing frustration and an all-consuming emptiness that threatens to swallow you whole. In the months that followed Daryl's disappearance, justice finally caught up with Frank Fickle, who was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Daryl did not deserve to die in such a horrific manner. He had a right to be alive, to raise his children, to love them fiercely. He had been placed on this earth for a reason, and Frank had no right to shatter that divine plan, stepping outside the bounds of humanity, as if he were removing pieces from God's intricate tapestry. Mary Ellen's involvement had an undeniable impact. It may have nudged investigators to dig deeper, to have those crucial conversations that could turn the tide. Initially, this was merely a missing person case, and such investigations typically don't warrant the involvement of detectives. Yet her insights illuminated pathways that might have otherwise remained dark, transforming the search for Daryl into a quest for truth and justice. If Mary Ellen were to approach me again with any new information regarding the crime we were investigating, I would undoubtedly give her the attention she deserved. I would treat her insights with significantly more weight than I had previously. This was not just an issue of protocol anymore. It was personal, and I was keenly aware of the stakes involved. Had I embarked on this journey without Mary Ellen's guidance, I would have felt utterly adrift, hopelessly lost in a sea of questions and uncertainties. It's sobering to think that without her involvement, we may never have uncovered the truth of what happened to Daryl. Ultimately, Daryl did get to wear his gray-striped suit at his funeral, a poignant detail for which Mary Ellen was profoundly grateful. My own life, however, had been irrevocably altered as I found myself caught between two worlds: the earthly realm, filled with pain and loss, and the spirit world, where perhaps Daryl's essence lingered, watching over us,